Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day 10 of the holiday card series for 2025. Today's card, what you're seeing here, is not the actual card for today, but it's one that I made earlier this month. And I wanted to create another version of it. Now, this card in particular was actually directly inspired by a card that was shared over at the Greetery. It used all their products. For today's card, I'm going to swap out one of the products. I'm going to use a die from Spellbinders, but this card design is directly inspired by a card made by Betsy Veldman over at the Greetery. So I cannot claim any kind of design according to this card. I just became obsessed with it and I had to create it. I had to get it out of my head, and I ended up creating this card or versions of it 8 times. So it uses a couple of embossing folders. The first is the Shortbread Shapes Snowflake embossing folder, and the second is the Rosemal Reflections. So you can kind of see it has the outer frame from the Shortbread Shapes, and then inside it has the Rosemal Reflections. So when I saw this card online, I had to dissect it. And the first time I made it, I just had no previous instruction. I was just going from the photos. And then I actually saw the walkthrough video that Betsy did for the November release. And I got some really good tips just from her describing how she made the card. So the first thing I did was I made myself a template. This is just a separate piece of cardstock that I've run through using that embossing folder. I'm now taking the coordinating dies and I'm going to cut the outer shape. I thought I maybe could cut the inner shape at the same time, but as you can see, the points on those two sides overlap with the outer frame die, so I was unable to cut them at the same time. So I'm only cutting the outer frame first, and I ran that through my die cutting machine, and then I'm going to cut out the inner shape. The reason why you want to do this is, as you can see now, a lot of that beautiful embossing has been flattened out by running it through my die cutting machine after it's been embossed. And we want all of that embossing to be really, really apparent. So if we can do the die cutting first and then do the embossing folder, that would be the best case scenario. So that's why I'm creating a template, so I can cut out this frame shape and then emboss it. So here's this blue frame. I can actually keep this and use it on multiple cards. It's going to be great. And now I have this Woodgrain cardstock. When I originally made my cards, I used some Woodgrain cardstock from Lawn Fawn. And then I found another source online that Betsy had mentioned at Instagram where she found hers. And I was able to buy a pack of, I think it was 50 sheets. And you know I bought them because, as I said, I've been obsessed with this card. And I knew I wanted to create it multiple times. And I might use this frame idea for multiple cards throughout this year. I just love the look of it so much. So what I did was I used my blue template and I puzzle pieced that star die right over the top of my Woodgrain cardstock, and then I was able to cut it out. So now I have my frame, and all I need to do is add the embossing. So I'm going back to that embossing folder and I'm going to line it up inside the embossing folder. And for this particular part, really take your time. Don't speed through this. You want it to have to be lined up as the best as you can. So after I have that lined up, I then took it to my Platinum 6 machine from Spellbinders. This is a 3D embossing folder, so I like to pull out my Platinum 6 when I'm doing embossing folders. Now, another tip I got from Betsy in a recent video was for, in particular, these ones that are die cut first and then embossed, you sometimes get a better result if you kind of roll it through halfway, take it out, and then roll it through from the other direction. And that's because as the paper is pressed inside the die cutting machine, sometimes it can really kind of stretch and warp the paper, and then it doesn't line up in the embossing folder anymore. So that's what I did, and I found that it worked much better that way. So that was a really great tip from Betsy. Thank you, Betsy. So here's my frame. It's beautiful. We're going to emphasize the texture in a bit by adding some ink on top. we're now working on the second one. So I cut out that outer shape first, and now I'm using the Rosemal Reflections embossing folder. For this one, I'm just lining it up, and I want to have those two sides in the middle kind of centered right over those roses. I'm also kind of eyeing the top and bottom to make sure those are lined up as well. So it took a minute to get that all positioned, and then I ran it through my Platinum 6. And this time I didn't stop halfway through. I just put it all the way through because the lining up on the embossing folder wasn't as important on this piece. So I have all this beautiful texture, and we're actually going to be able to see that texture on the inside of the card when we're finished. So it's not going to all be lost. Now I've got some more products from the Greetery. This is the Capsule Filigree borders and also the Capsule Basics dies. I used these a couple of weeks ago. When I checked, when I was editing this video, everything I'm using is in stock. So if you are inspired and you would like to use any of these products, go on over to the Greetery, give their shop a look. I promise you, you will fill your cart very quickly. For these two little holly sprigs from Spellbinders, I cut out the actual sprigs out of white cardstock and then the berries out of cranberry cardstock from Concord and Ninth. To add color to the holly sprigs, I'm using 2 colors of ink from Concord and Ninth. I'm starting with parsley, and I'm concentrating the color on the leaves. I want the leaves to be a brighter green near the stem and then almost fade completely to white at the very tip of each leaf. This is going to give us a really dynamic look on these holly sprigs. So it's pretty, there's lots of contrast here, really intense green and then out to that very, very pale green. I then switched to the Evergreen ink pad, and I used that for the full stem and then concentrating that color right at the base of each leaf. I also made sure to coat each one of the berry areas. We're going to eventually adhere the red berries on top, so that won't matter as much that they're green right now. So I removed this from the outer shape, and I'm left with these really awesome looking holly sprigs. I love that really high contrast from the intense dark green to the really light color at the tips. I went back over with just whatever ink was left on my little brush and added a little more of that parsley. I then took some liquid glue. This is glue from Honeybee, and I put a little dot on each spot of the berries and then used a pickup tool from Pink Fresh just to add those little berries on top. And I like to have the packaging off to the side when I do this. That just really helps me envision where each of these berries go. All right, so now I'm going to go to those oval shapes. I'm putting a little line of glue around the very outer edge, and then I'm putting my gold filigree border right over top. And I used some matte gold cardstock from Concord and Ninth to cut out that really intricate oval shape. I've noticed with this one, when I put it on the pre-cut oval, the white oval, that sometimes you need to kind of use your fingertips and manipulate the frame to really get it to match up on all the edges. Okay, so here we are. We've got our embossed pieces now. I'm emphasizing the texture from the embossing folder by ink blending a little bit of a dark brown ink over top. I'm using a large blending brush from Simon Says Stamp and Walnut Stain Distress ink. And this really kind of warms up the brown color of this Woodgrain cardstock as well. I think it looks really, really awesome, and it emphasizes the embossing that is shown on the final card. So for this one, I just needed that outer frame. And then for the actual die cut frame, I'm going over every single area. And you can see as I start to go around on the frame how just having that ink on the outer edges and just kind of hitting the embossing really looks nice. And the ink kind of catches a little bit of that wood grain texture too. I think it really emphasizes the wood look. All right, so that's how those are going to eventually look together. I'm now working on the greeting. I'm using the Rosemal Reflections Sentiment Stamp Set and the Rosemal Reflections Die Set. And I think this is the Rosemal Reflections, I think it's just the basic die set. So I'm taking out that banner that matches the kind of curvature of the greeting. And I'm stamping the Season's Greetings stamp on white cardstock, and I'm going to be stamping it in white pigment ink so that I can add some embossing powder on top. So I prepped it with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm stamping the greeting in the white pigment ink. I actually stamped it twice, but you don't see it here. And then I sprinkled on some gold embossing powder. This embossing powder is from Brutus Monroe, and it's the color Gilded. It's my favorite gold, and it happens to match that matte gold cardstock from Concord and Ninth fairly well. So I like to use those two products in conjunction. I die cut the Season's Greetings banner, and now I'm going to add a little bit of color to it by doing some ink blending. I've got my grip mat back out here, and it's holding that banner in place while I use a little mini blending brush from Altenew to bring in some Tide Pool ink from Concord and Ninth. I just wanted a little bit of this aqua blue color, just adding a little bit of shading onto the banner. Okay, so for the back of the card, so it actually creates a folded card, I cut that outer shape using some white cardstock. I used my scoreboard or score buddy to line that up, and then I scored about 1/2 inch from one edge. I then kind of folded back that little piece to get it ready, and then I put some tape runner adhesive, like a really strong adhesive. This is Tombow Extreme Adhesive, but if you have score tape or red line tape, something like that, you want something really strong that's going to hold that fold. I then put the full wood grain panel piece right on top, kind of lined up those edges. It's kind of hard with this kind of ornate shape to get it lined up just perfectly. There we go. Kind of had to stretch it a little bit. And now I have a folded card base. I could open and close it, and I have a nice kind of fold going down that one side. All right, so there's the card actually created. So now we're going to start adhering everything on top and building the design. I'm first starting with that oval piece, and thankfully it has a nice spot right in the center. It's really easy to line that up. And then for this frame that's going to go over the top, I wanted a little bit of dimension, but not too much because I am going to be mailing this card. So I'm using some 1 millimeter narrow foam strip from let's see, who's it from? Scrapbook.com. And I'm picking up 3 of these all at the same time, so it almost forms a thicker piece of tape. And then I'm going to bring it over to the frame and go around and adhere these just all the way around the frame. I also took the individual narrow foam strips and I added those around the really skinny areas on the frame to make sure that I had a little bit of adhesive holding those areas as well. I then took off the release paper and then lined it up over the top of my card and pressed down. Now, like I said before, this very ornate shape, it's sometimes hard to get it lined up just right. So you're going to see my head pop in here in the corner of the video a little bit. I really needed to see right on top of this card to get it lined up. Next, I adhered my holly sprigs, and they were a little too tall for that open area. So I placed them on the card and then snipped off the bottom ends. I then used some liquid glue and I put that on the back of each one of these little holly sprigs and then adhered it down onto the card. And I really loved how this taller one kind of overlaps the frame a little bit, like it's coming out of the frame. I thought that was really, really fun. I'm gluing on the second little holly sprig. And now I'm going to adhere the greeting onto the card. This is the last step to finish the card. And I'm going to do a little bit of bending of the cardstock on the banner so that it has a little bit of height. I kind of took a cue from the shape of the banner that this is like a banner that is waving in the air. So I bent the left-hand side kind of back and then the right-hand side coming forward. So I have kind of this S curvature to the banner. And now I'm taking some 2 millimeter mini foam squares, also from scrapbook.com, and I'm putting a mini foam square behind the areas that are raised away from the card. So right under that kind of hill on the left-hand side, and then right on the right end, because it's kind of flipping up. I then took a line of liquid glue, and I'm going to add the liquid glue to the areas where it's going to be touching the card. So right under that kind of valley in the banner, and then also on the left edge. So these 4 adhesive points are going to hold the banner to the card. And by using just a little bit of foam underneath those areas, it's going to allow the banner to mostly be flat, but have a little bit of a raised area. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be mailing this card, so I was very conscious of the fact that there's already a lot of layers of cardstock here. I didn't want to add any additional thickness by having that banner standing up any more than it was. So here's the finished card. I am just blown away with these products from the Greetery. I will have everything linked down below so you can take a little perusal over at their shop. I think it's just stellar and beautiful, and everything's designed to work together, and I've just been really impressed, especially with their October and November releases for this year. You guys know I can't resist a good holiday product, so I was ready to do some shopping. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's card. We have 2 more cards left in the holiday card series, so I hope you'll come back for those. I will see you on Monday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time to create Day 11 live.